Florida at Kentucky. Kentucky is favored by 2.5, and Kentucky's had a nice little run here against Florida the last couple of years. So for Florida, if they're able to win this game, think about the feather in the cap that would be for Billy Napier, and think about the measuring stick this would be for Billy Napier as a whole with his time at Florida. Because we said this in the offseason, we've kind of always felt like it's always been too soon to make any definitive statement on Billy Napier as a head coach at Florida. This is going to be a very pivotal year for us to get more data on him and understand what he's going to be as a head coach at Florida. And if you beat Kentucky at Kentucky, a team that you've had trouble with the last couple of years, a team that came to the Swamp and beat you last year, I think that would say a lot about the direction that they're headed. For Kentucky now, if you're going to make some noise in the East, if you're going to be that team that challenges Georgia, and that game is going to be primetime now in Athens. We already found out that Kentucky-Georgia game going to have a lot of spotlight on it. If you're going to be a team that makes that kind of noise, starts in this game. Starts in this game with just your first real test, to be honest, of the Devin Leary era. And no knock on Vanderbilt or the other teams they've played. This is just going to be the best competition they've played against. So, Coach Stoops sort of put out the call to action when asked about the kickoff time at his press conference. He said, I have tremendous confidence that our fans can get up early and pound some beers. So expect it to be rowdy for a noon kick and expect Kentucky's fan base to be out in full effect. So excited to break this one down for y'all. Excited to watch this one, man. I think one of the key matchups has got to be the Florida run game against that front seven of Kentucky. We've talked about Florida a fair amount on this show and predicted a fair amount of their big-time matchups they've had to this point in the year. And what do we always say with Florida? Everything they want to do offensively starts with running the football. That is their identity. Against Utah, they weren't really able to settle into that because Utah hit some big plays early, hit a big play early rather, and that kind of forced them out of rhythm. They want to control the game, and they want to keep this Kentucky defense off balance. The way that you saw it work against Tennessee is exactly the way that you want it to be against Kentucky. Now, the Kentucky front seven, again, have not played elite competition just yet, but they are giving up 2.3 yards a carry. That's good for number 7 in the country. Translation, immovable object, meet unstoppable force, or you would hope an unstoppable force from what you saw against Tennessee if you're a Florida fan. Now, again, with Florida, if they can run the football, it's that domino effect, right? Everything that you want to have happen starts to fall into place. Game control sort of gets rolling a little bit. You're able to take time off the clock. You're able to sort of get that defense a little bit more winded because they're staying on the field so long. You extend drives. Also, the pass game starts to open up. I got to say this too. Put some respect on Graham Mertz's name, man. There was so much said about him coming from Wisconsin, going to Florida. There was a feeling like, man, that's really who they're taking through the portal. That's their guy. Dude, he's been phenomenal to this point. And I understand the game against Utah wasn't, his best showing, but he had to throw the ball 44 times, and I thought still played well in that game. I say their best showing as a team, but I thought Graham Mertz still played relatively well. Against Tennessee, he played awesome. They need that kind of stat line he had against Tennessee in this kind of game. And you allow him to have that stat line if you run the football effectively. So if you run the football effectively and the pass game opportunities open up, then we need our wide receivers to win. Ricky Pearsall, looking right at you, brother. You are the alpha dog wide receiver in that room. Need you to separate. Need you to go make some more OBJ kind of catches where you're like reaching over with your front hand and just doing the crazy one-handed snag. Got to stick him on the fingers. Need that kind of effort from him. Need them to win one-on-one. That's crucial for Florida if the pass game does become available. But again, it all compounds on each other. The run game has to be there. Now, if Kentucky can be solid in the run game, if Kentucky can stick right around to that 2.3 yards a carry number they've shown so far this year in terms of what they've held opponents to, well, then you go back to that Utah game and you see Graham Mertz probably have that attempts number in the 30s, in the 40s. You don't want that if you're Florida. If you're Kentucky, you absolutely want that because that means you're forcing a lot of 3rd and long, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. And when you can sit back there and you have a better feel for the obvious passing situation, obviously, by nature of it being obvious passing down, your defense is better prepared to be aligned for success and just as a whole be able to get off the field, which is crucial for them in this game. So that's crucial to watch, a key matchup, the Florida run game against that Kentucky front seven. Now, another thing we got to watch in this game, Austin Armstrong, defensive coordinator for Florida, dialing it up against Devin Leary, the Kentucky quarterback. Now, when I say dial it up, I don't necessarily exclusively mean pressure. That could be a part of it. But I think for Devin Leary and for this Kentucky operation as a whole, man, they have so many weapons and they want to be a passing football team. They want to run the football, absolutely, but they are 54% pass on the year. They're pro style, and they want to let Devin Leary cook. Devin Leary and these weapons are too talented to where if you just kind of play vanilla, they're going to pick you apart. Dane Key is going to get his. Barry and Brown is an explosive play waiting to happen. So if you just kind of sit back and try and keep it all in front of you and just kind of try and play honest and try not to make a mistake and try not get exposed, like bad things are going to happen. You can't just be vanilla against Devin Leary and this offensive attack of Kentucky. You got to be exotic. You got to be creative. And if that's pressure, great. It could also just be disguising looks. It could also just be rock and rolling the safeties pre-snap and then going back to cover 2 when you were showing cover 3. Like, it could be something like that. But I'm just saying, you have to be, in some way, shape, or form, an operation that keeps Kentucky guessing. Have to keep them guessing. If you can confuse Devin Leary, or at least cause an acclimation period for Devin Leary early in this football game, well, then the Florida offense, what we say, they get to kind of wear on the defense. They get some more possessions to figure it out, and it will be paramount for Florida to be able to play with a lead. And if not play with a lead, at least play within a score. Have it be a 3-point game. Have it be a 4-point game. Whatever it is, that's where Florida wants to live. Game control, for the way that Florida operates, is enormous for them to win this football game, especially on the road. So, something to watch for in this game. I would not be surprised in the slightest if we saw Kentucky take a page out of Utah's playbook. And what I mean, not necessarily literally, I guess it could be literal, but remember Utah, first play of the game. They come out swinging, dial it up, deep pass. Money Parks gets in the end zone. Wouldn't you know, already it's 7-0 Utah. If Kentucky can hit on some explosive plays early, if they swing the bat a couple of times, Barry and Brown deep, Dane Key deep, Tavian Robbins, like whoever it is, whichever playmaker you want to talk about for Kentucky, then the entire defense for Florida gets off balance. Going back to what we just said, then Florida gets into chase mode. This Florida team, as good as they are, as good as that backfield is, as good as that front seven looked against Tennessee, they are not built to chase you. They are built to go in close proximity, wrestle with you. They don't want to get into a track meet. That's not how they're built. So for Kentucky, if they're able to hit on a couple of those, one, you put them in chase mode, and then two, with that Florida defense being off balance, maybe that box is a little bit lighter. Maybe those linebackers don't trigger quite as quickly. Maybe Ray Davis gets to eat a little bit. And at that point, everything's open to you if you're Kentucky. So here's what I think is going to happen in this game. I think the physicality of what Florida has up front on both sides of the football is going to travel. I don't think what we saw against Tennessee was a fluke. I think Tennessee didn't tackle well, but I do think Florida can run the football. I also think this defense for Florida is going to be aggressive. I do not think we see Austin Armstrong and that defense just kind of sit back, let the game come to you. Devin Leary will give you a chance to figure us out. Like, I think it is all gas, no brakes. And I'm not talking about Steve Sarkisian or Texas. I think it is pedal to the metal. We're playing with nothing to lose, reckless abandon. Like Austin Armstrong says, we're going to run, we're going to hit. Like, that's how Florida's going to get down in this football game. And if they can do that and be disruptive, we've talked about it here, that's advantage Florida every single time, getting this defense going and getting that Kentucky offense a little bit out of sorts, which is tricky to do with Devin Leary, but I think it's possible for them, and I think it's what's ultimately going to be the differentiator in this game. I think they're going to have to weather the storm. Do not be surprised if Kentucky gets out to a 7-0 lead. Do not be surprised if it is 10-3 at the half or whatever it ends up being. That wouldn't shock me. So for Florida, similar to what we saw against Tennessee in the swamp, you're going to have to just kind of not panic. Everybody be cool, be calm. We've been here before. Stick to our game plan, run the football, and just keep chopping and keep chipping away. So I think it's close. I think Devin Leary does have a good day. I think these Kentucky receivers do impact the game, but I think the run game, and going back to what I said, the physicality of Florida ends up being the difference. Graham Mertz plays efficient football. I think Florida ends up winning this game 28-24. And think of what that does for Billy Napier. Think of what that does for the conversation around Florida. We've already talked about what they are on the recruiting trail. And those kids that committed to Florida in the summer, they were committing to an operation that won 6 football games, that had an over-under win total in Vegas. You don't think beating Tennessee, and if they do beat Kentucky, what that would mean for them in terms of trajectory and what they can sell to recruits on the recruiting trail? Like, I think that would be some more rocket fuel for them. So we like Florida to obviously cover the plus 2.5. We like Florida to win outright. Cannot wait for that game. Going to be, in a lot of ways, it could be a trajectory definer for Billy Napier and for this Florida football team in 2023. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.